This was my biggest project yet, bringing to life the Devourer of Worlds, Galactus. I hope you enjoy. The Galactus file I used is from Wicked 3D and is available for purchase on Colts 3D and through their Patreon. This model was already absolutely huge, but I did scale it up a bit more to max out the build plates across my machines. I printed the parts using 3 FDM machines, and in total the entire print took right around 240 hours, with some individual pieces alone taking 40 plus hours. For print settings, I mainly used stock settings, but played around a lot with print orientation for the cleanest possible layer lines. All of the parts were printed at 0.2mm layer height with a 10 to 15% gyroid infill and 3 to 4 walls depending on the piece. I normally would print larger projects with a lower infill, but I really wanted the finished model to have some weight to it and a premium feel. I think in total it used around 7 rolls of filament. When everything was finally finished printing, I removed all of the supports and cleaned up the pieces a bit. And this is when the true scale of the model started to kick in. After dry fitting the model to make sure all the pieces fit together correctly, I then primed the model with a 2-in-1 sandable filler primer. I forgot to record this step, but I sanded down some of the pieces before applying a second, lighter coat of the filler primer. Galactus has a very strong two-tone color design of usually pink and blue or purple and blue, depending on the variation. I decided to go with the darker variation, trying to loosely follow this reference image. So for the base coat, I used Rust-Oleum Gloss Blue and a Gloss Purple to give a nice dark base of colors to build from. For airbrushing the pieces, I used metallic blue on the blue parts and metallic purple on the purple to add a really nice highlight to the darker base colors. I thinned down the metallic colors quite a bit to help build up the highlights over several passes while still keeping the darker shadows from the base coat. I focused the airbrush at a downward angle, trying to imagine how light would reflect off the surfaces of the pieces, focusing the metallic onto the raised parts of the armor to build up those highlights on the edges. This was only the first coat of airbrushing. I'll have to come back later after masking some of the larger parts. In the meantime, I've moved my attention to the base, where I originally started filling gaps with wood filler and wasn't too happy with how it was covering. It was super soft and I didn't trust how strong it would dry, so I ended up using kind of a mix of the wood filler and my trusted Aves epoxy sculpt. I filled in the gaps and sanded it down a bit before covering it with black primer. I wanted to get a dark steel look, so I lightly airbrushed silver onto the black to highlight some of the edges and make the details pop. But I ended up going a bit overboard with the silver though, so to help tone it down and add some weathering, I then applied a wash of Nuln Oil and Agrax Earthshade. Once I was happy with the base's color, I cut a piece of felt to add to the bottom with these fancy scissors and used Gorilla spray adhesive to attach the felt to the bottom. I always love to do this to my statues. It really elevates the model and gives it a more professional finish, and it hides a lot of imperfections, especially on a base like this with really large separated pieces. Be careful if you use this adhesive though, it sets almost instantly and overspray from it will stain your parts. With the base finished and the main colors down, I moved on to masking some of the larger pieces, and this process took forever. This model has a ton of detail, so I had to take my time choosing which lines to mask and mirror them on either side. When you use masking tape that you are painting over, you want to make sure it has a waxy layer on top so the paint can't bleed through and react with the masking adhesive, especially when you're covering a large surface like this. By the way, I will have affiliate links for everything I used on this project in the description if you are interested in checking out any of the items. Somehow, also during this time, I decided to add an LED into his chest. I bought this LED for another project, but it was too weak for what I needed it for. But for Galactus, it almost seemed like it was literally made for this model. The diameter of the light in his chest hole were almost identical. I didn't get it on camera because I was freaking out a bit at this step, but for adding the LED, I drilled a hole in his chest and then printed a custom housing for the LED light that I secured in place with CA glue and epoxy. With the masking finally done on his torso and his skirt, I painted over the parts with the same gloss navy blue I used on the base coat, and then used the same method of airbrushing to spray the metallic blue down the model, highlighting the raised details. With the LED light secured and looking awesome, I moved on to Silver Surfer. I resin printed 2 of them just in case there were problems. This was printed in my new studio and I wasn't sure if the temperature or vibrations from the other machines would affect the print, but they came out great. After curing and some cleanup and sanding, I kept the paint job really simple and airbrushed the entire model with Vallejo chrome. The paint job on this entire build was actually really simple, with the exception of masking, and it took a lot of paint. A lot of paint. And patience. I think I used in total 5 cans of spray paint and 4 or 5 entire bottles of airbrush paint. I was so happy to finally come to the next step, which was assembling and gluing the model. After several weekends, it felt like I was approaching the finish line. For gluing the model, I used this Cameleo thick CA glue, and it worked really well. It took a bit longer to set than a gel CA glue, but it was a lot cheaper and came in larger sizes. For the skin tone on the face, I used a variation of the Pinkle method that I've learned from watching Ground Affected. It is a super simple method of layering different skin tones over a base of a color that is not quite purple and it's not quite pink, starting with darker colors and skin tones and working up to thin down lighter skin tones, again using the same technique of darker tones from the bottom and applying lighter tones where light would reflect from the surface. Now that I was happy with all of the paint work, I moved the entire model outside to lock in the paint with a gloss clear automotive enamel. This step protects the paint from wear and tear and UV damage, and it added a really nice shine to the armor pieces. I then set the model inside my studio with fans aimed at it, and I let it dry for several days. For the final step, and the one I was dreading, I painted the eyes the best I could to make them appear to have a glow. I started with tones of blue, and then wet blended lighter and lighter tones until I finished with white. In hindsight, I should have probably added LEDs for the eyes because it would have had a more dramatic effect, but I was actually really happy with how they turned out. So after 1 week of printing, several weekends of painting and figuring out how to work in my new studio, I finally herald Galactus. If you stuck around to the end of the video, I really appreciate it. This was a different format to what I normally make, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you did enjoy this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. I've added links for all the tools I use in the description if you want to check them out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next project.